All right, y'all, welcome to the show. It is Tuesday, October 4th, 2022. Got my drugs here with me. Got my drugs. No, I am not sponsored by Red Bull, but I'm getting high as fuck off Red Bull. Plan to be bouncing off the walls today. We'll see if that actually happens, because I'm pretty tired, which is why I'm having the Red Bull. But anyway, big shout out to the patrons before we get started today. I got an awesome show lined up for you today. Ben Shapiro talks about how modern society is castrating men. Okay. We have House Democratic leadership going out of their way to kill the stock trading ban on purpose. We'll talk about that. Alex Jones did an interview with Channel 5 and went off the rails, which is quite unsurprising for somebody by the name of Alex Jones. We got new Marjorie Taylor Greene insanity. We have one of the most hilarious political ads I've ever seen from a Republican senator. And later on in the show, a new treatment that, at least in early trials, has absolutely walloped cancer. So, some hope on that front, if I don't say so myself. But again, real quick, shameless plugs. Shout out to the people who are patrons of this show. You guys make the show work. Shout out to people who support Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. You guys make this show work. If you guys are... Actually, let me know in the comment section below how many of you are listening on the podcast apps now, because we just recently started putting the full Kyle Kulinski show shows on the podcast apps, and so everybody can listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm curious how many of you have done that versus how many of you are like tried and true, YouTube, no matter what type people. Because the difference is, of course, with the podcast apps, you just listen to the whole show. YouTube, you got to go like video for video. So I'm curious how many of you have done that and listened over there. And yeah, just everybody do a little quick subscribington and little like skis and click that bell notification. I don't remember the percentages, but there's like 20-30%, something like that, of the people who watch this channel don't even sub to the channel. And so if they do, maybe you'll get your boy over 1 million subs. And I know the algorithm's not going to treat me kindly, never has, so I'm not going to be able to get there unless y'all hook a brother up. So anyway, enough with the shameless plugs. Let's go ahead and jump into it. And we're going to start with Ben Shapiro. So first things first, Ben Shapiro. I'm not the first one to make this observation. Others have made it before me, but the facial hair, dog... I don't know, man. I don't know. Look, some percentage of dudes, grow a beard or grow a goatee or something, and they immediately look better. And then others, not so much. So me personally, looking at Ben, I don't know, man. Clean shaven might be the way to go. Or if you're going to have the beard, do it like a little more trimmed up nicely. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not on point, dog. I'm just looking out for you. It's not on point. So I'm not trying to be an asshole, but I got to point it out because it's the elephant in the room. Anyway, so this Ben Shapiro video is titled, How Modern Society is Castrating Men. Castrating Men. I'd like to point out the irony up front that, of course, the argument is going to be against the left, because that's like literally every video he's ever done ever. But what's funny is, here's a dude who supports circumcision, but his argument is society is castrating men. No, you support the almost castration of men. You support the genital mutilation of men. Whereas I, somebody on the left, I am against circumcision. I'm against the random and unnecessary and cruel genital mutilation of babies. I know, controversial position. The funny thing is, it actually is kind of a controversial position, since it's such like a strong cultural force and a thing that's been done for an extended period of time. A lot of people think you're crazy if you're like, I'm against circumcision. But look, all the arguments that are in favor of it are sort of like bullshit rationalizations after the fact. Like, does it lowers STDs or something, bro? You are genitally mutilating babies. That is what's happening. He supports it, I don't. So I would argue Ben Shapiro supports the near castration of men, certainly the genital mutilation of men. So for him to, make this argument of society is kind of hilarious. Anyway, let's go ahead and dive into it.
controversy has broken out over my friend and colleague here, Jordan Peterson.
By the way, he's on 1.25 times speed, which again, for Ben, sounds like he's on like 4 times speed because he speaks freakishly fast.
He went on Piers Morgan's show, and he was asked specifically about Olivia Wilde's brand.
So we got a little Jordan Peterson action in here. He's going to play a clip of Jordan Peterson. Let's dive into all of it.
New movie, Don't Worry, Darling, which is getting just excoriated by the critics, which is a shocker because she is one of the protected people, Olivia Wilde. She's a feminist hero. And it doesn't matter that this feminist hero made the actual star of that film, Florence Pugh, apparently extraordinarily uncomfortable on set because she was banging Florence Pugh's co-star, Harry Styles. None of that matters because Olivia Wilde is a feminist hero for making a movie that basically suggests that men want to put women back in the kitchen, like it's the 1950s, etc. Well, the movie, Don't Worry, Darling, apparently, one of the stars, Chris Pine, according to Olivia Wilde, is basically playing Jordan Peterson. Right? He's supposed to be a cult leader who's trying to create a mental, I don't want to give any spoilers for this dumb movie, but apparently he's trying to create some sort of mental system that people live in, kind of virtual reality, whereby young men can essentially train women to be put back into the kitchen. And that's what Jordan Peterson wants. And so she says that character, that Chris Pine cult leader character, is based on Jordan Peterson. So Jordan was asked about this by Piers Morgan over on Sky News. And he got rather emotional about the idea that he should not be attempting to reach out and help disaffected young men.
So let me point out, I haven't seen this movie. Seems like Ben hasn't seen it either. So I can't really comment on the movie. But the idea that like, oh, Jordan Peterson wants women to be back in the kitchen or whatever. Look, I do think Jordan and people on the right should be upfront with the fact that, yeah, you support traditional gender roles. So now, is that maybe a slight straw man of your position because it takes it too far and implies like you want to ban women in the workplace? Maybe, right? That might be a slight straw man, but the core of it is actually kind of true because you support traditional gender roles, you know, men in their place and women in their place, and you think that's the way society works the best. So it's interesting that like you'll make those arguments that point to that conclusion, but then when somebody else is like, hey, you want this, you're like, no, I don't. Why would you say such a thing? It just seems kind of weaselly, you know, but to be fair, I do think Jordan Peterson is more upfront with his position on that. Like, I don't think he's playing hide the ball with it. Whereas Ben Shapiro here is sort of like, he makes these arguments, but then the logical conclusion of those arguments, he plays hide the ball with that. And he acts like, I didn't say that, even though you did kind of just say that. And like, you do kind of support that. So let's just clear that up front.
Here's what Jordan had to say.
The film director Olivia Wilde has a new movie out.
And by the way, just quick side note, I have no problem. If people want to do the traditional gender roles, I have nothing against you. You know, if you're a dude and you want to be the sole breadwinner and you're the wife and you prefer to be at home and raise the kids and take care of the household, I mean, that's a full-time job anyway. Nothing but respect for that. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. I think the argument, at least from reasonable lefties, is like, but let people choose whatever they want to do, full stop. And if people don't want to be in those traditional gender roles, well then, again, there's no, why would you judge that? It seems kind of silly to judge that.
She says it's based on you, this insane man, this pseudo-intellectual hero to the incel community. Incel being these weirdo loner men who are despicable in many ways. Is that you? Are you the intellectual hero to these people?
Sure. Why not? You know, people have been after me for a long time because I've been speaking to disaffected young men. You know, what a terrible thing to do that is. I thought the marginalized were supposed to have a voice.
It's making you emotional. Talk about it.
Well, God, you know, it's very difficult to understand how demoralized people are. And certainly many young men are in that category. And you get these casual insults, these incels. What does that mean? It's like, well, these men, they don't know how to make themselves attractive to women who are very picky, and good for them. Women, like, be picky. That's your gift, man. Demand high standards from your men. Fair enough. But all these men who are alienated, it's like they're lonesome and they don't know what to do, and everyone piles abuse on them.
All right, so let me just say in reaction to that, I have no problem whatsoever with, you know, you're a voice or a leader for young men who feel sort of dispossessed. You know, in some ways, I serve that role and other creators serve that role. There's young men that like to watch the show and they get some semblance of, you know, understanding or guidance from the show, and that's like, cool. I have nothing against that whatsoever. And I think Jordan, when he was primarily focused on psychology stuff, I think that's why he got popular in the first place, is that he would say almost very basic fatherly things, but dress it up in a way that intellectually sounded interesting to young men, and so they gravitated towards that. And that was all fine and dandy. I think the issue is, of course, when over time he's drifted more and more, not just in like the self-help psychology lane, but he drifted more and more into the political lane, and he's got some questionable takes, to say the least, on politics. And that's the concern. It's like, okay, if you're leading these young men, if you're just providing them guidance to clean their room and get their shit together, all fine and dandy, I like that. But for the love of God, don't cross that line into some genuinely draconian beliefs politically. And, that's where people, I think, have an issue with it. Like, one of the things Jordan said, which was very famous, which I definitely take issue with, is this idea of, like, you literally can't protest or criticize the world until you have your stuff in perfect order. And it's like, by that logic, Martin Luther King could have never did what he did, and the Civil Rights Movement could have never did what they did, and people who protested the Vietnam War could have never did what they did and shouldn't do what they did, even though, like, for all of whatever personal issues Martin Luther King had, and he had many, he was a philanderer and other things, like, what he did was great, it was necessary, it was important. And so when he crosses into the political realm, that's where, my red flags go up, and I'm like, dude, like, that, what you're saying there is not true. What you're saying there makes no sense. I like that you're telling kids to clean their room and get their shit together, but for the love of God, when he starts talking about, like, Russia and Ukraine and having his weird take on that, when he starts talking about how he's not sure if even transgender adults should have the right to transition, now you're you went from leading men to, in some instances, misleading them. And that's where I start to have a problem with it. Now, in terms of the crying, yeah, people were making fun of him for crying. You got to keep it real, though. He does do it a lot. He does do it a lot, man. He does do it a lot. Now, you could take whatever lesson or whatever implication from that you want. Look, I'm just guessing here, but from my perspective, it seems like whatever he went through with the benzo addiction, and he was basically in a forced-induced coma in Russia in some clinic for an extended period of time. It seems like the medical stuff he went through really impacted him, where he's sort of like emotionally dysregulated. Now, again, I'm just guessing. I'm an outsider. I can't know for sure, but it appears like that's the case. Anyway, let's continue.
So the fact that Jordan gets emotional in favor of these young men, that he's attempting to give a sense of purpose, this is what the media and the left have jumped on. So there's a great hypocrisy here, right? The media and the left, they suggest that masculinity, traditional masculinity, is bad because traditional masculinity doesn't allow you to show your feelings. Then here's Jordan Peterson, a hero to a lot of young men because he stands in favor of traditional masculinity and masculine roles. And he's getting openly emotional, right? He's tearing up while talking about these people who are disaffected. So he's demonstrating to them that emotionality in public is actually not the end of the world, and the left is angry at him for that. But this goes to a broader point.
Again, it's not that he cried, it's that he seems to do it all the time. All the time. Now, we can pretend like that's not evidence of some sort of emotional issue, but I seem to think it is, Now, people are free to disagree with me on that, but I think it's fair to say, dude, you seem like you're struggling a little bit because you keep breaking down in public, and he sometimes seemingly does it at times where you wouldn't expect somebody to break down.
That is really dangerous in American life right now. And that is that a huge swath of elite opinion makers in the United States, a huge swath...
Ben, you are an elite opinion maker. You are that. So is Jordan. You are that. So don't pretend like you're not, dude.
...of our media, many members of the political left, they have decided that there's an entirely dispensable portion of the population, and this is young, disaffected men. And that is having a radical impact on how people live. Well...
Okay. Of course he cuts to an ad, because naturally, this is Ben Shapiro. We're lucky he didn't do it before 3 minutes and 38 seconds. But I really take issue with this goofy idea. I really take issue with this idea. No, as somebody who's on the left, and being that I run in left circles and I talk to other lefties, nobody is like besmirching or disregarding young men. No, quite the opposite. We're saying our path to try to improve the lives of these people is to do what? Push for more unionization, push for higher minimum wage, push for more paid time off, impact their life from an economic perspective to give them a chance at a better life. So we care about the issue. We're just tackling it instead of like an individualist bootstrap your way out of it type thing. We're trying to fix it from a systemic issue. Like, hey man, if you work full time and you're not making enough money to survive, that's not really your fault. That's more of a societal issue. So let's fix the economy so that you don't feel like you're always behind and always struggling to get ahead.
Well, folks, there are a lot of people out there who feel like they're not getting the respect they deserve. But let's talk about one way that you can get the respect you deserve. You can become a lord or lady. Yes, you can earn that title through established titles. Apparently, all
He acts like he's such a voice for, like, the people, and then he sells these weird, like, scammy-ass type things. Anyway, let me fast forward. Unbelievable.
In Scotland, but around the planet, they have partnerships with global charities like One Tree Planted and Trees for the Planets of My Own. So, depending on how many .com/Ben,
How long is this fucking ad?
your gifts right now help support the channel. I'm not just talking about men here. I'm talking about women too. It turns out that women are generally not in favor of androgynous, feminized men. They do not like it. These statistics on female happiness over the course of the last half century have not demonstrated increased female happiness with the
But why would you say that is related to the men becoming more androgynous and like you would need evidence to that effect. I don't think he has any evidence to that effect. The idea that like female happiness is only correlated directly with the way men are presenting, that seems incredibly goofy and made up. There's probably many factors that are leading into however women report their happiness level to be.
The androgenization of gender. They have not created extraordinary levels of female happiness with later marriage and less childbearing and rearing. It's not good for women. It's particularly not good for men. The stats on men right now are devastating in the United States. David Brooks has a piece today in the New York Times titled The Crisis of Men and Boys. He says, if you've been paying attention to the social trends, you probably have some inkling that boys and men are struggling in the United States and across the globe. They're struggling in the classroom. American girls are 14 percentage points more likely to be school ready than boys at age 5, controlling for parental characteristics. By high school, 2/3 of the students in the top 10% of the class, ranked by GPA, are girls. Roughly 2/3 of the students at the lowest decile are boys.
Okay, again, what do you want to do to actually fix this, Ben? Because it seems like his answer is like, all right, guys, start acting like Chuck Norris from the 1980s. Like, be super traditionally masculine in the sense that you're really, like, macho and arrogant, and you drive a sports car, and you're a leader, and you yell at people. Like, the idea that that approach would impact any of the stuff that he's mentioning here is comical. It's laughable. You know, again, the way to improve the lives of both men and women, where they self-report their happiness levels being higher, is to fundamentally restructure our political and economic system. So it's more democratic, and you give people a decent chance at having a better life. You know, again, union rates is a huge thing. We had the golden age of economic expansion in the U.S., and the strongest middle class we ever had was when we had higher union rates. That's a fact. That's an absolute fact. And also higher taxes on the rich in that period as well. So, strong unions, higher minimum wage, worker protections, paid time off by law, make it so that, you know, Tom Harmon was talking about this the other day. Back in the day, you used to be able to, with just a high school diploma, go work at the factory and have a car, a house, and even have a small, like, vacation house. And this, again, this is something he experienced firsthand, and he talks about it. Those days are gone, man. Those days are gone. So you think maybe the absolute gutting of the American working class has something to do with the declining rates of happiness among men and women? I think so. I think so. So if you address... Now, that's not to say, oh, if you fix the economy and create a more fair system, that all of these social ills will be fixed. Of course not. But the way you handle whatever despair is left over after you fix the economy is through things like, you know, mental health professionals, right? Creating a sense of community for people, whether it's community around a religious institution in the town that everybody goes to, or community around a sports league, the local basketball court, or playing soccer on the weekends, or whatever. All this stuff sounds corny, but human beings are fundamentally social animals, so you need these outlets. His argument here, the implication of his argument is like, just act more like masculine and we're good. And by the way, what we consider masculine and feminine, a lot of that stuff over time has evolved and changed completely. Back in the day, who was it? I think it was Ottoman soldiers in the Ottoman Empire. They were the originators of high heels, and it was men who wore it when they rode on horseback. It was like soldiers would wear it. Now we associate high heels with being feminine. There's nothing that's like innately or biologically feminine about high heels. This is total social convention. This is all about culture. This is all about nurture, not about nature. So that's one example. Another example is, it used to be the case that pink was the boy color and blue was the girl color. Back in the day, it used to be the case that even little boys would be dressed up in dresses when they were babies by their parents. These are all things you might think that, you know, a dress is inherently female and the color blue is inherently male. All this stuff, this is all social convention. So what we perceive as fundamentally masculine or feminine, in many respects, is kind of made up. Now, that's not me saying there are no differences biologically between men and women, because of course there are. But I think oftentimes they're fucking overstated by people like Ben, who are trying to make a cheap political point that, the reason for the downfall of society is because men are fucking wearing earrings now. Well, what do I got right here, bitch? Soak that in right there, brother. You like that?
In 2020, at the 16 top American law schools, not a single one of the flagship law reviews had a man as editor-in-chief. Men are struggling in the workplace. 1 in 3 American men with only a high school diploma, 10 million men, is now out of the labor force. The biggest drop in employment is among young men aged 25 to 34.
Again, it's hilarious this guy's complaining about, the economic numbers. Ben is in favor of every single policy that makes these indicators worse. He loves cutting taxes for the rich. He loves deregulating. He hates unions.
Men who entered the workforce in 1983 will earn about 10% less in real terms in their lifetimes than those who started one generation earlier. Over the same period, women's...
So do you want to raise wages, Ben? Of course you don't.
Lifetime earnings have increased 33%. Pretty much all of the income gains middle-class American families have enjoyed since 1970 are because of increases in women's earnings. Now, all of that would be perfectly well and good if the net happiness here were up. It is not.
And which are some of the happiest countries in the world? The Scandinavian countries, Ben. The social democracies. The countries that have nationalized more industries and have stronger unions, have higher taxes on the rich, have higher wages for the workers. Those are the countries that are happier. So if you really cared about happiness level, you'd be advocating for social democracy, because empirically they're much happier, but he's not going to do that because he doesn't support those systems. He's just down the line right-wing guy, totally stale, totally boring, totally uninteresting, not really interested in these questions he's putting forward, looking for the nuanced, intelligent answers around it. He's just doing his same old song and dance. And this is the tap dance of men are men, women are women, men should be masculine, women should be feminine, and that would solve all these incredibly complex social problems that I'm running through the list of right now.
Men are also struggling physically. Men account for close to 3 out of every 4 deaths of despair, suicide, and drug overdoses. For every 100 middle-aged women who die of COVID up to mid-September 2021, there are 184 middle-aged men who died. Richard Reeves' new book of Boys and Men is a landmark, one of the most important books of the year, not only because it's a comprehensive look at the male crisis, but also because it searches for the roots of that crisis and offers solutions. Policies and programs designed to promote social mobility often work for women, but not men. Reeves, a scholar at the Brookings Institution, that's a liberal think tank, visited Kalamazoo, Michigan, where thanks to a donor, high school graduates get to go to colleges in the state for free. The program increased the number of women getting college degrees by 45%. The men's graduation rates remained flat. Reeves lists a whole series of programs, from early childhood education to college support efforts, that produced impressive gains for women, but did not boost men. There are many reasons men are struggling. According to David Brooks, for example, the decline in manufacturing jobs that put a high value on physical strength, the rise of service sector jobs. But I was struck by the theme of demoralization that wafts through the book. Reeves talked to men in Kalamazoo about why women were leaping ahead. They said women are more motivated, work harder, plan ahead better, but this isn't a matter of individual responsibility. There's something in modern culture that is producing an aspiration gap. Many men just seem less ambitious.
Again, it's amazing he's reading through these points and not understanding he has actively been in favor of all of these policies which have fostered this reality. He has been. It's undeniable. I mean, you just talked about the destruction of American manufacturing. Whose fault is that? All the people who support totally unfettered so-called free trade deals that are really just outsourcing deals that have gutted the American working class. I mean, NAFTA and GATT and permanent normal trade relations with China, this has destroyed millions of jobs and tens of thousands of factories in the U.S. And yes, back in the day, it was more likely a man felt like he had a purpose, right? You have your family, you have your job, you provide for your kids, and now we've effectively gutted the ability of certainly undereducated men to have any chance at a better future, all because of the policies that people like Ben Shapiro, Ronald Reagan, these people push for and advocate for. And that's not to say there's no fault on the Democrat side. Bill Clinton, of course, is to blame. He's the one who signed NAFTA, right? So this isn't just squarely a Republicans are the problem thing. But the ideological core here, the issue here, is that he's in favor of the stuff that led to this problem in the first place. And now his answer is what? Act more like Steven Seagal in the 1990s? Like, stiff upper lip and just be strong and you'll get through it?
More men are leading haphazard and lonely lives. Roughly 15% of men say they have no close friends, up from 3% in 1990. 1 in 5 fathers doesn't live with his children. In 2014, more young men were living with their parents than with a wife or partner. Apparently, even many who are married are not ideal mates. Wives are now twice as likely to initiate divorces as their husband. So David Brooks says ambition doesn't just happen, it has to be fired. The culture is still searching for a modern masculine ideal. It is not instilling in many boys the nurturing and emotion.
See, this is where these people, even David Brooks here, he's just bringing it back to identity. Like, oh, you know what the problem is? You don't have a sufficient role model to be the ideal male. That is not the problem. The problem is economic. The problem is political. The problem is cultural. The problem is not like let's have an archetype of a man who you want to follow and be like. You could have the perfect archetype or archetypes, and the political and economic situation around it is going to override any sort of like, looking up to a father figure type shit. It's this instinct to personalize the societal problem that's annoying here. That's a huge problem. Fundamentally, it's identity politics, right? Like, here, grasp onto an identity, and then you'll be able to like thrive and succeed. Well, not necessarily. It doesn't matter what identity you grasp onto if your entire factory town was obliterated because they shipped the jobs to Mexico.
Emotional skills that are so desperately important today, a system that labels more than a fifth of all boys developmentally disabled is not instilling in them a sense of confidence and competence. Masculinity has gone haywire. And then, of course, he adds the obligatory, because he's David Brooks, rip on Republicans. Reverting to pseudo-macho cartoons like Donald Trump and Josh Hawley doesn't help. What? I was completely unaware that the alternatives here were the complete feminization of men and Donald Trump. Like, I love that.
Okay. But that does kind of seem to be the argument you're making. Lefties are in favor of these, like, super feminized androgynous men, and I'm in favor of the hardcore masculine man. I don't give a fuck. However people identify, whatever role they want to assume, you can have a society where people assume whatever role they want, but also, since the economy is flourishing, since the political angle democratically is thriving, then you're going to have an okay society, right? But you're the one that's effectively making that argument, Ben. This idea of, like, just be more masculine and then everything will sort of work out. It's garbage.
He's unwilling to acknowledge the obvious. What has happened here is the sexual revolution has castrated men in terms of their ambition, in terms of their mobility.
That is total bullshit. The sexual revolution has castrated men. Why are you threatened by, like, this idea of a strong woman or a woman that, makes her own money, has her own career? Why is that so threatening? I don't understand it. Now, again, some men will prefer the more passive, traditionally feminine role wife that takes care of everything at home and all. That's fine. I'm not judging you, but stop judging a woman who's like a go-getter and who's independent and has a job. And as a dude who grew up in this exact same environment, there's nothing threatening about that at all, Ben. At all. What is it? What kind of weird ego thing is it where you're not okay with that? I don't understand it. Let's run that back.
Donald Trump. Like, I love that. He's unwilling to acknowledge the obvious. What has happened here is the sexual revolution has castrated men in terms of their ambition, in terms of their mobility. That is what the sexual revolution did, and it did not make women happier. That is the dirty little secret here.
But first of all, I also want to say, like, all these generalizations I find super annoying. Because these are the same kinds of generalizations that when people on the left talk about, like, black people are like this and white people are like this, they're like, people like Ben say, oh my God, stop it. That's so stupid. You're generalizing, you're essentializing somebody based on their skin color. But he loves essentializing people based on their biological sex or their gender. He loves doing that. So now look, are you against essentializing or are you for essentializing? Make your mind up, right? Me personally, I'm generally against it. So I don't like these conversations about women are like this and men are like this. I find it all stupid, but come on, man. What kind of an argument is this? Even for Ben Shapiro, this is a pathetic argument. Obviously, it's not the sexual revolution that led to all of our current problems with the lack of meaning and purpose people have and the shitty economy. The economy, the moves we made were on purpose by the top 1% in corporations to screw the American working class to make an extra buck by shipping all the jobs overseas. That is a huge problem. Now, in terms of the social perspective or the cultural perspective when it comes to this, yes, I agree that because of a lack of community, people are struggling, right? And back in the day, there was more of a sense of community. Now there's not nearly as much of a sense of community. But like I said, the way you address that is by rebuilding community, whether it be in the form of everybody goes to the church on Sunday, or everybody plays in a soccer league or whatever. Everybody has this hobby that they like to do, and they have little clubs built around that. There has been sort of a breakdown of community, and now communities are mostly online, and that's a little different. I don't think it's as fulfilling as in-person communication. So, yeah, there's a social aspect to it as well. But first and foremost came the economic destruction and degradation of the country, and then the lack of community in this modern era. Bring those two things back, and everything will be fine. It has nothing to do with the sexual revolution, making women more loose and more like men, and that's the problem. It's just so childish, man. Look, they have all this rhetoric about freedom and liberty and things of that nature. He doesn't support that. I actually support that. You should have the freedom to do whatever you want to do, whether you're a man or a woman or whatever, and, you know, you can assume whatever role you want to assume, and maybe you'll end up happy, maybe you won't. But at the end of the day, it's better for you to have that choice. So his idea, his notion is like, men need to be men and women need to be women. Men need to be the sole breadwinner and women need to, you know, effectively be in the kitchen and taking care of the traditional things that women used to take care of. That's really what the implication of everything he's saying is. But of course he balks when you bring that up and say, isn't this your position? He's like, oh no, I didn't say that. Well then don't make shitty arguments like you're making where that is the implication. So, Jesus. It's annoying to me that he's as popular as he is, because scratch a little beneath the surface and all of his arguments are dog shit. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.